You're listening to the CyberWire Network, powered by N2K.
Hi there. Sam Eisenberg from N2K here, inviting you to join me for a brand new monthly segment that you can find right here in the CyberWire Daily called Learning Layer. Cybersecurity is a constantly changing field, and you need to evolve with it. That means you'll need to acquire new skills and new knowledge. Join me as we learn how to learn in the cybersecurity space. On Learning Layer, we'll be chatting about everything from how to improve technical skills to certification exam prep to brain science. Happy learning. I'll see you in the layer.
Hello, dear listeners. Today I want to share and recommend a podcast that I recently became a fan of, and I think it's worth your time, and you should check it out. The show is called Compiler, and it's produced by the folks at Red Hat. The subtitle for the show is Simplifying Tech for Tomorrow's IT Leaders, and the show certainly does that, but it does a lot more. I'm getting ahead of myself. The reason Compiler has earned a regular spot on my podcast playlist is the genuine, authentic curiosity of the show's hosts, Angela Andrews and Brent Simoneau. Angela and Brent are your guides for journeys into all sorts of tech topics that are relevant to folks in cybersecurity and IT, and they do it in a way that's casual and conversational, but also smart and concise. This is a show that respects your time while feeding your curiosity. And Compiler has something for everyone. Doesn't matter if you're just getting started in your tech career or if you're a seasoned pro. I'm willing to bet that you'll find the Compiler podcast both entertaining and informative. So check it out. It's the Compiler podcast from Red Hat. You can find it wherever you get your podcasts. China deploys tools used against Uyghurs in broader espionage. The Five Eyes call out a GRU cyberespionage campaign. Russian hacktivists' auxiliaries hit Czech banks and the platform formerly known as Twitter. A Spring-Kafka 0 day is discovered. Deepan Desai from Zscaler explains Red Energy Stealer as ransomware attacks. Luke Nelson of UHY Consulting on ransomware's impact on schools. And go Wolverines! The University of Michigan overcomes a cyber attack that delayed the academic year. I'm Dave Bittner with your CyberWire Intel briefing for Thursday, August 31st, 2023. We begin today with developing stories on cyberespionage. Cybersecurity firm ESET is reporting that the China-linked threat actor they track as GREF is distributing the Bad Bazaar Android malware via Trojanized versions of Telegram and Signal in the Google Play Store and the Samsung Galaxy Store. Both stores have since removed the malicious apps. ESET notes that Bad Bazaar has been used in the past to target Uyghurs and other Turkic ethnic minorities. In this case, the malicious Telegram app called Flygram was shared in a Uyghur Telegram group. The researchers add that the malicious Signal app called Signal Plus Messenger represents the first documented case of spying on a victim's Signal communications by secretly auto-linking the compromised device to the attacker's Signal device. Here's a second story that may or may not be traceable to Chinese intelligence services. Researchers at security firm Trend Micro describe a cyberespionage campaign by a cyber-criminal group the researchers call Earth Estries. The threat actor is targeting organizations in the government and technology industries based in the Philippines, Taiwan, Malaysia, South Africa, Germany, and the U.S. Trend Micro states, "We believe the threat actors behind Earth Estries are working with high-level resources and functioning with sophisticated skills and experience in cyberespionage and illicit activities. The researchers refrain from making any attributions, but they note that there are some overlaps between Earth Estries and the China-linked Famous Sparrow APT. We note that they did describe Earth Estries as having high-level resources and some cyberespionage sophistication, so the hints are still circumstantial, but as the old saying has it, if it walks like a duck and sounds like a duck, it's probably a duck." Early this morning, the Five Eyes, the intelligence services of Australia, Canada, New Zealand, the United Kingdom, and the United States, issued a joint advisory providing further details on the malware infamous Chisel, used in a GRU cyberespionage campaign first described early this month by Ukraine's SBU. Infamous Chisel targets Android devices on behalf of Sandworm, the threat group associated with the GRU's main Center for Special Technologies. The U.S. Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency explains that it performs periodic scanning of files and network information for exfiltration, including system and application configuration files. It provides network backdoor access via a Tor hidden service and SSH, as well as other capabilities that include network monitoring, traffic collection, SSH access, network scanning, and SCP file transfer. Infamous Chisel isn't sophisticated or well-crafted malware. The Five Eyes assess the malware's components as representing low to medium sophistication. They appear to have been developed with little regard to defense evasion or concealment of malicious activity. Its targets seem to have been mainly Ukrainian military devices. The UK's National Cybersecurity Centre framed the report as an instance of support for Ukraine. Paul Chichester, NCSC Director of Operations, said, "The exposure of this malicious campaign against Ukrainian military targets illustrates how Russia's illegal war in Ukraine continues to play out in cyberspace. Our new report shares expert analysis of how this new malware operates and is the latest example of our work with allies in support of Ukraine's staunch defense. The UK is committed to calling out Russian cyber aggression, and we will continue to do so." In addition to GRU cyberespionage, Russian cyber activity continues in the form of implausibly deniable hacktivist cutouts, tools, and fronts for Moscow's intelligence services. No-name 05716, the Russian hacktivist auxiliary, moved from operations against Poland to hit a similar target set in the Czech Republic. The BRNO Daily today reported distributed denial of service attacks against a number of Czech banks, as well as the Prague Stock Exchange. These were nuisance-level attacks representing no threat to the organizations or their customers' data. No Name says the attacks are intended to punish the victims' support for Ukraine and to induce them to reconsider such report. Full service was restored at most sites within hours of the attack. Anonymous Sudan, which is probably neither Sudanese nor anonymous, but rather a hacktivist auxiliary answering to Russian intelligence services, yesterday disrupted the social media platform X in about a dozen countries, the BBC reports. The nominal goal of the action was to get Mr. Elon Musk to open up Starlink service to Sudan. The hacktivists, stung by widespread suspicion that they're really a bunch of Russians, offered the BBC such evidence as images of passports to attest to their bona fides as for real Sudanese. Judge for yourselves. It's worth noting that the Russian cyber operations deployed in the current hybrid war against Ukraine, apart from some wiper attacks executed in the opening hours of the shooting war a year and a half ago, have largely been confined to conventional cyber espionage and nuisance-level hacktivism. The much-feared crippling bolt from the blue has yet to arrive. Turning to a newly discovered vulnerability, researchers at security firm Contrast Security have discovered a deserialization vulnerability affecting Spring-Kafka, a project used for development of Kafka-based messaging services. Contrast explains, Insecure deserialization occurs when a vulnerability allows untrusted or unknown data to be passed, enabling a denial-of-service attack, code execution, authentication bypass, or other types of abuse to an application's logic. The researchers were able to develop a proof of concept that could conduct remote code execution or denial-of-service attacks. VMware has issued a patch for the vulnerability. And finally, the University of Michigan has restored internet to its Ann Arbor, Dearborn, and Flint campuses after sustaining a cybersecurity incident over the weekend, EdScoop reports. The company had severed its networks from the internet due to a significant security concern. University President Santa J. Ono stated yesterday, "We expect some issues with select systems and services in the short term, and not all of our remediation efforts are complete. However, they will be resolved over the next several days." The university is working with federal law enforcement to investigate the incident. It seems the university took quick and decisive action to respond to the attack, which itself argues that they had prepared and exercised that response. That's the consensus of the experts we heard from, which we'll summarize by saying, "Go Wolverines." Coming up after the break, Deepan Desai from Zscaler explains Red Energy Stealer as a ransomware attacks. Luke Nelson from UHY Consulting on ransomware's impact on schools. Stay with us. Unlock the power of streamlined cyber risk management with our sponsor, LogicGate. LogicGate's cutting-edge Risk Cloud platform automates your risk and compliance workflows and integrates with your existing security tooling to help you stay ahead of cyber threats. Keep up with ever-changing regulations and make confident, informed decisions with fully configurable features and real-time insights. Set your mind at ease with full visibility into your cyber risk landscape. Choose Risk Cloud for a smarter, more efficient approach to cyber risk management. Visit logicgate.com to schedule your personalized demo today. Again, that's logicgate.com. Struggling to secure on-prem apps with modern identity? Don't worry, you're not alone. Join industry leaders from Fortune 500 organizations to secure your apps on any cloud with any IDP, regardless of your environment's complexity. Meet Strata's identity orchestration platform, Mavericks. Say goodbye to the headaches of app refactoring and legacy tech debt. With identity orchestration, you can modernize legacy apps to use MFA or passwordless authentication in a few weeks, migrate from one IDP to another, and so much more without changing the app. No matter your IAM use case, Strata extends the value of your current identity investments. And the best part? You can try it for free today. Visit strata.io/cyberwire to share your biggest identity challenge, and they'll hook you up with a complimentary pair of AirPods Pro. Don't miss out. Visit strata.io/cyberwire. That's strata.io/cyberwire. Luke Nelson is managing director at UHY Consulting. I recently spoke with him about the state of ransomware, its impact on schools, and how the Biden administration's plans will affect cybersecurity.
Well, certainly as we saw schools move more remotely with the pandemic a few years ago, there was an opportunity for bad actors to manipulate and take advantage of that situation. So we've certainly seen cyber attacks directionally increase for school systems, local, state governments in general, as they've gone to more of a remote workplace. And so, as we think about what the government's response is to those activities, there's certainly, an education component to it. And there's certainly how do we increase the mitigants that will disallow those bad actors to have access to, student information, students being able to be productive in the school place as well.
So, how has the Biden administration addressed this? What sort of plans are they signaling here?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think about it in terms of it's been a progression. So if you look back into, 2020, I believe was when they first came out with the Cybersecurity Improvement Act that really talked about the IoT, the Internet of Things, and the government being able to, meet the minimum security requirements that needed to take place. The reason that was initially pushed out was because at that particular point in time, I think there was something around, mid 90% in terms of unencrypted data that was moving back and forth between, the federal government agencies. And they said, we needed to change that. As we fast forward a little bit, there was a cyber grant program that was approved through the State and Local Cybersecurity Act in 2022 that actually allowed funding for those state and local entities to take federal money and increase their security posture. Where that initially started was you need to do a risk assessment, using the NIST security framework and determine what your plan would be. In year one, I believe there was about $180 million that was distributed into those local and state entities. This year, I guess, it was almost double, almost 375 million, if I'm recalling correctly, that got pushed out to use. Simultaneously, as that 375 million was being approved, the Biden administration and the Department of Education, came out and said, we want to make sure that the Department of Education is pushing out some standards as well to specifically K through 12 schools. So my assumption is that part of that money that has already been tagged for that local and state government funding grant program will actually make its way into the K-12. I would also anticipate through directly the Department of Education for not only vendors to be able to be selected for the education, for the hardening of devices and the like, but also for the Department of Education to take a look at how students are learning in this new kind of remote world and whether or not that they feel as if there needs to be some adjustments to the overall infrastructure.
Yeah, it really seems like a huge problem to tackle, and not the least of which is, that schools are run by the states. And so there's so many different ways of organizing the districts, the different sizes and different ways of funding them. It's going to be a challenge for the feds to come in here. I mean, I suppose on the one hand, every school system welcomes additional funding from the feds to help them tackle this problem.
Yeah, that's exactly right. The intention of the Local and State Investment Act is really to take federal monies and distribute it to those local and state agencies to determine how they want to use it. We have seen some of that be used specifically for schools, but obviously it's intended to be a broader reach other than just schools. However, with the recent acknowledgement from the Biden administration on specifically the Department of Education and how they want to be moving through the process, they'll either use those federal funds to do something similar specifically for K through 12, or there will be additional funds allocated based upon the findings that they're seeing as part of this initial rollout.
It strikes me that cybersecurity in particular is something that has broad bipartisan support, which, is a bit of a unicorn in today's political environment. Do you feel as though the Biden administration is doing a good job of taking advantage of that sentiment these days?
Yeah, I think it's ever evolving, right? I mean, unfortunately, the cybersecurity space is evolving in real time, right? From a day-to-day perspective, that industry, and I'll call it an industry, is well funded. whether that's, nation state actors or private institutions who are going after assets, right? I mean, they want to see a return on what they're seizing. I'll call it that, right? So in terms of like a ransomware type of an event, right? If you can lock down a school for a number of days or get access to student information, can I make $50,000 and not get prosecuted for it? We're seeing a lot of that take place basically because the price point for entry is so low, a couple $1,000s, right? You can spin up a environment that you could go and act in a nefarious capacity for these school districts, right? And that's going to continue to evolve. So part of what I think the Biden administration is taking a look at is understanding processes and the human component as to whether or not we need to educate more versus harden technology systems, which I do think is part of the answer. So I do think they're taking advantage of what the current sentiment is, but also at the same time, it's a reality of as we move more and more into a digital world. We obviously moved more quickly due to COVID and the pandemic into the space, but we're going to continue to move more digitally, or continue to for school systems. And now's the time to take a look at and say, how do we want to design this differently in the future?
That's Luke Nelson from UHY Consulting. And joining me once again is Deepan Desai. He is the Global CISO and Head of Security Research and Operations at Zscaler. Deepan, it's always my pleasure to welcome you back to the show. I want to talk today about some research that you all recently put out. This is Ransomware Redefined, Red Energy Stealer as a Ransomware Attacks. Help me understand what you all are uncovering here.
Yeah, thank you, Dave. So, Red Energy Stealer, and this actually is a campaign that we spoke about at a security conference, BotConf, early this year. So the team in this case actually discovered a new family, honestly, a new threat category, which we've dubbed Stealer as a ransomware. So the family involved here, Red Energy, uses a fake update campaign, and it's responsible for targeting multiple industry verticals. The goal over here is to steal information from various web browser and exfiltrating sensitive data. And then it also has these additional modules incorporated inside. And one of them, as I mentioned earlier, is ransomware. So this is where they're encrypting the files, and that's where we're seeing this interesting merge of activities of a stealer as well as ransomware.
So in terms of them activating the different tiers of capabilities here, is this a case where are they stealing the information first, and then if they don't get what they want, then do they threaten the ransomware component, or how are they coming at things?
Yeah, so in the campaign that we observed, we didn't see the ransomware functionality invoked. But as we analyzed the payload that was planted on the endpoint, right, the focus main was, yes, there was active stealing of information once the attack is successful. But when we analyzed the payload and we looked at all the different capabilities, the malware actually includes ransomware module that encrypts the user data, and the extension they used was an interesting one as well. I won't spell it. But it basically, the goal over there is to render the system unusable, right? And if the payload has been installed on multiple systems, then it's going to cause business disruption as well. We did not see any kind of lateral propagation module in this, but that's still possible as a second stage payload that they can download, that they can always download on one of the systems that's infected and then move laterally from that point onward.
I see in the research here that they're also going after your backups.
Yes. Deleting backup is an important functionality, especially when you encrypt data and user is able to easily revert back to the previous backup, right? So if you want the ransomware functionality to be effective, this is something that they will always incorporate. Now, that's where doing those offline backups, air gap backups, right, where your backup information is secure even after these type of activities done on your endpoint is extremely important.
And what have you seen in terms of who these folks seem to be targeting?
So they were targeting multiple industry verticals, but we specifically saw them targeting manufacturing industries. And there were multiple companies that we saw, all of which had notable LinkedIn and internet presence as well. So I would say manufacturing industry is their primary target over here.
And how does someone find themselves infected with this? You mentioned this is it's a fake update campaign?
Yeah, it's the old, hey, your plugin needs to be updated, your browser needs to be updated, and this is where the infection chain starts. When someone falls for this, the initial payload gets installed. It will then attempt to escalate privilege. It will also download further payloads, and the CNC activity begins from that point onwards.
I see. All right. Well, Deepan Desai is the Global CISO and Head of Security Research and Operations at Zscaler. Deepan, thank you so much for joining us.
It's my pleasure, Dave.
Tired of cybersecurity mega conferences? MWise is different. With a focused agenda and targeted problem solving, MWise is where security's best go to get better. From September 18th through the 20th in Washington, D.C., you'll join a special community of security's sharpest minds, hear perspectives you might not get anywhere else, and reach a new level of mastery that'll prepare you for what's next. Register early and save at mwise.mandiant.com/conf23. That's mwise.mandiant.com/CONF23. And that's the CyberWire. For links to all of today's stories, check out our daily briefing at thecyberwire.com. We'd love to know what you think of this podcast. You can email us at cyberwire@n2k.com. Your feedback helps us ensure we're delivering the information and insights that help keep you a step ahead in the rapidly changing world of cybersecurity. We're privileged that N2K and podcasts like the CyberWire are part of the daily intelligence routine of many of the most influential leaders and operators in the public and private sector, as well as the critical security teams supporting the Fortune 500 and many of the world's preeminent intelligence and law enforcement agencies. N2K's strategic workforce intelligence optimizes the value of your biggest investment, your people. We make you smarter about your team while making your team smarter. Learn more at n2k.com. This episode was produced by Liz Irvin and senior producer Jennifer Iben. Our mixer is Trey Hester, with original music by Elliot Peltzman. The show was written by our editorial staff. Our executive editor is Peter Kilpie, and I'm Dave Bittner. Thanks for listening. We'll see you back here tomorrow.